Got it.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming to the channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Maurice Andrews, and I'll just be on here talking about board games and mostly Marvel Champions. But today is a little different. I have a special guest here. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen our banter back and forth, especially if it has something to do with Marvel Champions. But we talk a lot about board games online. He mentioned something about color blindness in board games, and this led to this call here that we're on. So I'd like to introduce Brian Chandler, man. How you doing today?
I'm good, Maurice. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So Brian, go ahead and give a quick introduction about what you do and kind of why we're here today talking about color blindness.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Maurice. Again, thanks for having me. My name's Brian. I live near Seattle, and uh, really have focused the last several years on accessibility in gaming. I think the idea being that there are a lot of games, be they video games or board games, that everyone cannot play. And the barriers that come from accessibility needs are typically unintentional, right? So there are the intentional barriers of we want our games to be hard. We want a challenge. That's often what makes something a game. But some of what can make a game hard for, say, someone like me who struggles with being able to differentiate color are can make something harder than it was intended to be by the designer, right? There's a big difference between the challenge as expected and then a challenge that isn't that's like unequal or isn't equal for different people because of their own potential barriers, whether that's and then I focus on color blindness because that's what I can do from my own experience. Have also, as I've gotten older, can speak a little bit to the low vision experience too, as my eyesight's gotten worse. So that's sort of the two areas that I tend to focus in the most is color vision and then low vision. And then in the midst of it, I've kind of learned a little bit about the science of it, just because I'm part of what I'm trying to do as I try to identify what the solutions are. Because it isn't just, hey, this game's bad, I can't play it. It's, hey, I can't identify these two colors from each other. What might we be able to do to make that better?
Man, so just to give y'all some context, so right before I hit record, he and I were talking about Mass Effect, and he said I should have hit record because of the synopsis I gave for Mass Effect Andromeda. I wasn't topping that intro he just gave, so that was amazing, man. I appreciate that. So just to kind of give y'all an idea of what we're going to do, I had some questions because I learned in my infinite ignorance of people's struggles sometimes about I'm learning about color blindness in games, and or I guess amongst people within the games that they play. And this was an interesting topic because the first time I've ever seen this, I was playing Concordia with a group of my coworkers, and somebody mentioned that one of the guys at the table was colorblind, and I was like, "Oh, really? I had no idea." And he was like, "Yeah, if you ever play Concordia, there's colors all over the place with the maps that's on there, the different pieces." And he was saying how he had a struggle with differentiating sometimes between like red and brown, and then I think it was green and I want to say blue at times, depending on like the
Mm.
distance. If he gets closer to it, he can differentiate it a bit better. But it's a matter of distance more times than not for him. So when I saw Brian mention something about color blindness on Twitter, and we decided, like, hey, let's talk about it real quick. So I'll have some questions for him, and we'll just let the conversation flow from there. So one of the things I thought was interesting, and I'll leave a link to Brian's website because I've read several of your reviews, which I thought was interesting that you both reviewed the game and then from both a low visibility and color blindness aspect, like is this playable? So I thought that was cool to see. But whenever you're running into some of those I guess issues with components that may have a color that doesn't quite vibe with you, like where do you normally find components for games that could help you be able to play the game if the colors of the components aren't quite working out for you?
Yeah, really. I mean, it really depends a lot on what the component is and then what kind of change needs to be made. So a couple examples, probably one of the most common examples is just player colors, right? So a lot of games may not have any other color vision issues, but it plays up to 6, and it's really hard to get 6 colors that aren't going to have some kind of problem with, folks being able, or people like me, to be able to distinguish between some of them. So if I'm playing solo or 2 players, even up to 4, oftentimes it's not that big a deal, but that 5th and 6th color often can be, that's when they're pulling in a pink or a purple or a brown or something that's going to conflict with one of the other colors. Even if they started with something like, Crayola, red, blue, yellow, and even green. Sometimes even red and green isn't that big a deal if it's like the Crayola red and green from kindergarten. So when you get into these different shades, we're all trying to be very kind of cute with our design now, right? We're not using the Crayola 8 anymore in design because that doesn't fit the theme of a lot of games, right? We're trying to do something different than that. And that sometimes is great. Sometimes that actually works better. I posted about a game called Card Rails, I think, by Travis Hill. He has 5 different colors in that game, none of which are actual colors. They're black and brown and gray and light brown and white. And there's a 6th one too. And somehow, though, he's got 6 colors in that game, and I can distinguish the 6 from each other just fine. Whereas some other ones will be a problem. So what I do oftentimes for my own games is I take a Sharpie and I mark up the green ones so I can distinguish them from the red ones. And then might do the same thing if I have an issue with blue and purple. So it's the first step for me is not being afraid to take a Sharpie to my games and actually mark them up so I can play them. There can be some concern about what about the value of the game? What about reselling the game? The game is worth $0 to me if I can't play it, right? And so my kind of thought is this has no value right now. I've got a stack of games next to me that I can't play yet until I have my wife help me distinguish the blue meeples from the purple meeples in Hadrian's Wall and Paladins of the West Kingdom are 2 that I'm really struggling with right now. I cannot play those games. I'll be able to play them with not a lot of effort. I just need to get somebody to help me because I can't even mark them up correctly because I can't see them, right? I don't want to mess up my markups and then have something wrong there. So that's the first thing. Second is sometimes the components, it can be as easy as upgrading the components. So example of that could be like Century Spice Road. I marked my components up. There's actually an article I wrote about my modification to that game on my website. And that was fine. I just put some slashes and dots on a couple colors and it worked out just fine. But a lot of these like upgraded bits can also be accessibility needs. So if you think about a game like that has, you're using cubes for things like wheat and whatever it is, if you upgrade to the more realistic bits and now you've got shaped meeples, or if you think about those who might have played like the very first version of Agricola was a bunch of little cubes, and then the second edition of Agricola upgraded those to the Anna meeples. Anna meeples are perfect because they're both shaped different and they're a different color than each other. So it's that idea of what we call double coding. So being able to have 2 different codes that tell me, hey, this is a sheep because it's white, but it's also a sheep because it looks like a sheep. And then, or if I am even taking a Sharpie, it's like, this is the green character because it's green, but it's also the green character because I put a little vertical slash on the green ones and I didn't do that to the red ones. So that helps me be able to determine or discern the difference between the 2. So those are kind of 2 ways that I can do it aftermarket, is just finding ways that I can make those upgrades, not being afraid to quote unquote, I don't know, graffiti or markup or damage the game, with the idea that, and if I'm concerned that I really want to resell the game, I probably ought to just go sell the game. But if I actually think I want to play the game, then I sometimes need to mark it up. Now, to go backwards one step, usually I know before I get the game if it's something that I'm going to be able to play, because I will try to pay as much attention as I can. It's not quite the same seeing something on the screen or even in a video as it is seeing it in person on the table. But oftentimes I can at least get a feel of whether something's going to be a no-go for me or if it's going to be really hard. Now, that said, I just talked about some games that I had next to me. I purposely buy games I can't play because of my role of having a website about this stuff and being part of the industry and like wanting to like find games that are harder for me to play so that I can help other people like me be able to play them by coming up with a way to mark them up and do the modifications to make them playable, or come up with ideas to maybe make them, a little bit better.
Yeah, so I just thought of this question since you had that answer. So in that stack, that's I'm assuming over right to your left. What are those games that you know that you can't play that you're trying to figure out ways to have people that suffer from color blindness be able to play?
Yeah, I've got 3 right now, and they're all Garfield games because they suffer from the same issue. And I mentioned 2 of them. It's Hadrian's Wall, it's
Yeah,
Paladins of the West Kingdom, and
yeah.
Architects. Now, I will be honest,
Gotcha.
I have played Architects solo once or twice. It's the blue and the purple that are the biggest issue for me. There's a bit of a red-green issue on those too. That's not quite as bad. Sometimes it does depend on lighting conditions. And what I actually did for all 3 of those games is I ended up buying some sticker packs off Etsy. That's another one of those upgrades. Is some people make
Ooh,
little
that's a good
stickers
idea.
you can put on your meeples, and it makes the different characters different designs. So now they're not just different colors, but like maybe the blue meeples are a certain soldier type with a helmet, and then the purple meeples are like an old man or something, whatever, right? It's doing, but all the purples are the same in this sticker pack. All the blues are the same in this sticker pack. And so I'm using a different, again, it's double coating. I'm using a different design for the different colors of meeples.
Mhm.
The secondary problem I found is I have kind of shaky hands and I'm really bad at stickers. So, and these are little itty bitty stickers. Like, you imagine putting a sticker on a meeple, like I need to grab some tweezers or maybe again, get some help from somebody. So that's actually, I've been procrastinating the decision of, do I finally just try to sticker these and do it right? Or do I
Right.
just pull out my Sharpie? I can always put the stickers on top of the Sharpie meeples too. So I think I might even just do the Sharpie thing first. And then maybe if I either get brave enough or get some help to actually try the sticker situation. I'm just afraid they're gonna look so bad because I'm bad at legacy games, make me nervous with stickers. I was
Ooh,
just
that's
playing
yeah,
even Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, which is just that map.
right.
I played through
Or
the
even
first
some of the
5 or 6
cards, right?
scenarios. Yeah, maybe I haven't gotten to the cards yet in Gloomhaven that do that, or in Jaws of the Lion that do that. I played through Clank Legacy. That had a lot of
Ooh,
stickers, and
I
those
want to
stickers on
play
that
that one.
map, it's really, I liked it a lot. I did that pre-COVID, so I had like a Friday night
Oh,
legacy campaign for however many 10 or 12 weeks, however long that lasted, and it was really cool. This actually the only legacy game I played all the way through so far, but it's a good one. That another game, Clank Legacy, pretty close to colorblind friendly, except some of those little cubes. If you've ever played any of the Clank games, you put
yeah.
a bunch of cubes in the little bag and then you pull the cubes out. Well, some of those cubes look really close to each other. And so I definitely have struggled. I have Clank in Space that has the same problem. Some of those cubes are
Mm,
almost the same color for me. So, but again, I could change that by either marking them up, or a game like that, I could go get other types of cubes, right? There's iridescent, like clear cubes or silver and gold shiny cubes. And so I can find ways to even make the cubes a little bit more different from each other than they currently are. So that'd be another way to take a look at that for a game like Clank, like a bag builder or something.
so I have to ask because I know because I know that with you having a gaming group, have you ever brought over a game and somebody was like, "Bro, what is all of these marks, man? What are you doing?" Or do they just understand you well enough to be like, "Okay, I know why he's marking these things up," or they're just at this point accustomed to it, to where if they see markers, it just is what it is.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have a subset of gaming friends and people I play with who very much know my color vision. I'm obviously not, silent about it. I'm on a, video with you talking about it right now. I have a whole website about it. My handle on lots of social media is literally, colorblind games, or it's in my title. And so it's something that is kind of a shtick almost, right? I try not to use it that way because I think it's more
Right.
important than that, but it is a marketing thing, right? I'm just some guy, another middle-aged white guy talking about board games, right? And so having another angle to talk about that and about something that I truly think is important, and is personal to me. So it is selfish too, right? Um, so there's that group of friends who very much know and even will help me, or even they even bring me ideas or will bring games, bring me different tools and stuff to help, especially if they know a game might be a problem. They always let me pick yellow if I want to be the yellow player, because that's the best color for me most of the time when we're picking player colors. And I'll even ask other players, if we're yellow and blue and purple, I'll ask the purple player if they wouldn't mind being a different color, because I may have trouble seeing between the blue and purple, which is another quick thing. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Let me say this better. Sometimes what I care the most about is, are the player colors on the board me or are they not me? Sometimes it's like binary like that, right? I really don't care.
Right.
There's not enough interaction that I care what your players are. I just know that it's not my player color or my meeples or whatever
Right.
that are out there. But sometimes I do want to know, and sometimes I don't need to know to play the game, but I might need to know to be more strategic about the game, because I need to know who I might want to block or who's about to win. And so sometimes I might need to know not only who is me and not me, but who's me and who's player 2 and who's player 3 differentiated from each other. So in that case, I might ask, even at the beginning, even with strangers, sometimes I'll out myself and say, hey, I'm colorblind. Is it okay if I play yellow or whatever? I have a new gaming group out here. I actually live in, it's called Kitsap County, Washington. It's west of Seattle, across the water. Moved here this summer and have just started playing with a new group that I found, and have only played once. And we played Arc Nova and sat down to Arc Nova, had no problems or issues. I played an entire game night without anybody knowing I was colorblind. And I got to tell you, it was actually kind of nice to not have to talk about it and not have to like be a thing, because for that particular game, for me on that night, it wasn't a thing. And so it's a little bit of both. Sometimes I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about it. I played with a lot of strangers at Shucks back in December in Vancouver. And in a lot of those cases, I did need to kind of share. It was helpful for me to share that I was colorblind. But in some cases, it's kind of nice for that not to have, I don't have to lead with my business card, if that makes sense, right? I could just sit down and play a game. It doesn't have to be about creating content or being, quote unquote, the website or doing stuff for the channel or for the show. Sometimes I just want to go play a game, which I think can be hard. I don't know. Do you struggle with that at all now that you're doing videos? Do you ever play something that you maybe wouldn't want to play, but you feel pressure to because you need to make content about it?
No, sir.
Oh,
Because
good for
and
you.
this is, I think this is the difference between me and you. Because I just did a video yesterday with one of my friends, D20 Woodworking, and he talks a lot of Marvel Champions. And we were talking. I was telling him, like, I don't feel pressure making content because when I look at some of my peers, um you have a cause behind yours, in the
Mm,
sense that you're trying to help a subset of people with, this issue that's hard to amend, right? It's not like a video game where if I'm playing League of Legends, they have like a colorblind mode where the health bars are a different color or whatnot. Because one of the professional players, he's colorblind, and he was saying there was a champ that he was going up against, and what the champ, for those of you who play League of Legends, I'm talking about Tom Kench. And Tom Kench has this ability where his health is decreasing, but he's got another, like, I don't know the word for it, maybe translucent bar that is behind his main health bar. So he has an ability where whatever missing health he now has turns into a shield. And the professional player was like, I couldn't tell that he had a shield. So it seems like I would take his health down and then he'd be right back up to full health again. And so for me, I don't have that cause. I'm just out here talking board games. I just upload videos. I don't even edit them. So I'm just out here just talking about board games. So for me, I don't have the pressure to make content. So if I go a month or two without making something, it's a shrug of the shoulder for me, because it's more of a project than it is me trying to advance to monetize it or to, kind of put forth the cause, because I'm kind of a rebel without a cause, so to speak. I'm just out
yeah,
here,
no,
just
that's a
having
good
fun
point.
with people. Yeah.
And I would say I may be a little more hybrid in that I produced nothing in February this year. I didn't write a single article. I think I had a late January article, and then I'm putting out a couple of reviews in the next couple of weeks. But I do receive review copies sometimes, and so I do
Ooh.
feel the responsibility then to, obviously that's the deal, right? I'm getting a copy of a game early, or maybe I'm getting a copy of a published game for free that I get to keep and or give away or do whatever I want to with. And so that comes with the responsibility to give it a thoughtful review, really think about it, especially from an accessibility lens, because that's my world, right? And so you're right. I think I do feel some responsibility, at least to my niche audience, which is again very small, right? It's a niche of a
Right.
niche. It's people who have some visual accessibility barriers who also are playing board games. Now I do some video game work as well. So that is better. You're right, because there's a lot more tools available. It's a digital medium, and so you can make changes easier.
Right.
There's even more tools I have on my own desktop where I can look at colors and do things, as a user. But it's not perfect either. So there's a group I work with called Playability, and we consult to video game companies, and actually just recently wrapped one up last week with a company. We worked with several different folks, just helping them identify both, either to just have a conversation like this to say, hey, these are some of the accessibility issues that we run into as a group. I'm very specifically the colorblind specialist of this larger group. So the playability consultancy looks at everything. We have fully blind players, we have full vision, full or low vision players, sorry, colorblind players, that's me. And then we also are on the like ADHD part and some of the mental limitations and those barriers.
Wow.
The physical barriers, you think about like the Xbox adaptive controller, the new PlayStation
Right.
controller that came out this year, that's got more features, just thinking about the way the inputs work. And even like there's a step kind of in between there, if you think about the ability for people to even sit at a table for 2 hours. Like that can actually be hard for somebody to play a board game sitting at a table, or to be holding a controller with any kind of arthritis or chronic pain issues physically in hands. Or there's a lot of physical issues beyond just the visual part, both in video games and also in board games. You think about like how many cards can you comfortably hold in your hand in a board game or a card game, and I can hold 8 or 10 cards probably with no problem.
Right.
But there's some people who that really it's an issue. And so having the little card holder in front of you, that's an accessibility tool. That's not just a convenience piece, although it can be that as well. Or holding dominoes or Scrabble tiles or whatever, those little,
Right.
those devices, thinking about which of those can be most valuable. Are there games that you can play in bed? Are there games that you can play without having to have a table at all? What are some of the other ways to think about play without needing to sit at a kitchen table in a relatively uncomfortable chair, reaching over a table to try to manipulate components, some of which you might have trouble handling if you don't have 10 fingers, right? There's a lot of people who are in this space who have limitations, not only the kind that I have, but whatever their limitations and barriers might be. I really think they should get to play too. And so part of the work that I'm doing is I'm coming in from, my own experience and talking about color blindness, because that's what I have. It's also a very big group, right? 8% of males have some kind of color deficiency, and 0.5%
Oh,
of females have it. So like 1 in 12 men, 1 in 200 women have some kind of color vision barrier. That's a pretty big proportion, right? I did the
right.
math in my article, and something like, if you're at a table of 6 people playing a game, there's like a 28% chance that at least one person has a color vision barrier. That's a pretty good chance, right? If you're at a conference
Right.
of 100 people or a con, there's almost 100% chance once you get to a couple hundred people, it's almost assured that somebody's going to have some kind of a color vision issue, and they're likely going to be at your table, and they might not want to talk about it, to be quite honest, because it kind of gets into a thing. And every time I do mention I'm colorblind, usually the game stops. We spend about 5 minutes with them asking me what the colors are, right? Which is okay. I
Right.
get it. Again, I'm not trying to hide my deficiency. I've gone through that process a whole lot of times. I do sometimes turn it back and ask them, like, what makes you think, what is green to you? Like, where did you come up with the idea of green? Are you sure that your green is the same as your partner's green, or your brother's green, or your dad's green? Like, who's to say? We all have different eyes and different brains. And so I have a particular deficiency that I can name and kind of identify scientifically, but we all see things a little bit differently, right? And I don't know that we know, unless we're in somebody else's brain, what that might look like. Just something to think about too.
Yeah, because that's because I'll sit here. I was trying to figure out like how, what questions to ask you, how to even come up with the flow of this interview. And one of my favorite games to this day is Everdale. I think that it is both a beautiful, luscious art to the game. I think the components and the arts on the card are phenomenal. like you buy Everdale at MSRP, and then you open it and it's like a blinged out version of a game, and it's like these components are ridiculous. But then it made me think like who, in trying to look at things from, kind of what we've been talking about right now, like who all can truly appreciate it, right? Like when it comes to, being able to touch and feel those pieces, being able to hold 8 cards in your hand. And that kind of changes almost every time I look at a board game now, ever since I talked to you,
Hmm.
weeks ago when we were, thinking about doing this. And that made me think for you, like for designers, because I know that, like you say, 8% of the population has color blindness. So how can designers have, kind of keep that in mind, or is this something where they just do what they can to the best of their ability and just market to whoever is going to buy their game when it comes to the colors that they use, or even the iconography that they choose to put on their board games?
Yeah, so there's lots of things I could do. To back up one step, I
Yep.
still enjoy rainbows and sunsets and colors. I have a very colorful room. I love Everdell as it's a beautiful product, and it is, and I can play it because each of those little components isn't just a blue cube and a brown cube and a yellow cube, right? They're all
That's
shaped
true.
differently. They're easy for me to pick out, even if kind of the classic or the true kind of gold standard for a game for me would be if I were forced to play this in grayscale. So let's say for some reason there's a very, very small percentage of people who see in black and white. It's very rare. I've never met anyone who has that condition, but they do exist. Could they play the game if they only saw it in grayscale? Or when somebody's doing prototypes or maybe doing a card game, I'd say, hey, what if you printed this on the crappy $50 home printer behind me that in black and white? Could you actually still play the game? And that tests two things. It tests your colors. Are you relying on color? And then two, are your icons and stuff big enough that even if they're not printed perfectly, it's still easy to see or easy to read them? And is your contrast good? Because my printer's contrast is not good. And so even if it
Mm,
prints in a little bit less contrast, are you able to see? So those are kind of some of the initial tools. To go back, there are absolutely things that designers can do. The first step is even just thinking about it in the first place. So just having this idea in mind that there will be people playing my game who do not see the world or do not touch the world in the way that I do. And so as I'm thinking through that at the very beginning, trying to have empathy and just put myself in other people's shoes when I design my game. And so that can be everything from, am I using color to distinguish different things? And that you can do that. You don't need to not ever do that ever again. But if you're using, for example, colors that are going to be potentially easily confused, say red and green as an example, one thing that you can do is you can make your green really dark green and you can make your red really light red, like almost more of a pink. So if you've got a light red and you've got a dark green, I'm going to see those fine because I can actually see the difference between tone or brightness really well. I might even be able to see that better than you can because I use that all the time. I use brightness and tone probably as much or more than I use the actual Pantone, the color of something,
right.
because I can't distinguish the colors as well, but I can distinguish the light and dark. It's kind of like, people who are fully blind have better hearing. Like that's literally true. There's science behind that now.
Right.
Parts of their brain that would have been used for sight then get used to make their other senses stronger. The same thing for people who are deaf. From what I understand, they have different types of, there's just thing that parts of our body that it's amazing. Our brains are amazing and they find ways to use what they can with the tools that we have available to us. Um, I have a defective green cone in my eyes, and so I don't see all the colors quite right or in the same way that other people do. And so with that, I think comes, maybe something else. Maybe I have some superpower I don't know about. I don't know. But so that's one thing, is just thinking about that whenever you're designing the games. And then really then regardless, so color palette can matter. That's like the point, is it does matter what your color palette is. But more importantly, regardless of your color palette, there will be people with some kind of color deficiency who will not be able to see all the colors quite right in your palette. There is no perfect color palette for, especially if you get to 5, 6, 7 colors. It just isn't possible. There's 3 major types of color vision deficiency. based on the three cones in our eyes. But there's also extremely varying levels of those different deficiencies. And people just see things in a very different way. I was talking to Peter McPherson. He's a designer of Tiny Towns, Fit to Print that's coming out this year. Peter and I were talking together actually at Shucks back in last fall, December fall in Vancouver. He and I are both colorblind, but we have very different color vision deficiencies. So things that he struggles with, I don't. Things that I struggle with, he doesn't sometimes. And we've had a couple conversations about both his games and some other games where he and I have had very different experiences. So if somebody were to run a color palette by me and I give them like the 2 thumbs up, that doesn't mean that it's colorblind friendly just because I have the website, right? I'm just one guy with one experience. And this is a particular type of deficiency or barrier that varies widely. And so it's really important then to think about how else can you then code the information. And the way that we really focus on that is called double coding. And so that's not using only colors to distinguish different items, but also using symbols. Do you think classics are Pokemon and Magic? You don't have blue cards, you've got water cards, right? You don't have lightning card, or you have lightning cards, not yellow cards. Even though you can think about them as colors, you really talk about them as the symbols, right? Because the symbols are the things. And in that particular case, we actually talk about them as symbols. In Magic, you probably talk more about them as a red deck or a green deck or a black deck. But I think about them, or I'll still call them by those names, but I kind of think about them as the fire and the tree and the skull, because that's kind of what's in my head when I am looking at those, because I may be less apt to see the color difference quite as easy as I can see the symbols. So just thinking symbology, iconography matters a lot when it comes to those. Most like bigger games, mass market games have done a pretty good job of this over the years, partially because they just have kind of understood it. But a lot of hobby games, it's still a struggle. A lot of smaller publishers, it's an issue because they just haven't run into it yet. And so so that's part of what I'm doing too. I talked a lot about the aftermarket piece, how I mark up my games or maybe upgrade them. But what I'm trying to do more and more of is get myself into the earlier stages of design, development, publishing, helping out some companies before these games go to market so that they can actually address these along the way.
Dude, you like my mind is out here getting blown, man. But I want to shift it a little bit more back towards you, because I think because this is so niche and, at least to me, interesting. Like how did you get around to becoming more involved with helping designers or companies with the awareness of color blindness?
That's a good
How
question.
how did you get started in all of this?
I mean, I started by playing games and running into this issue, right? So I played games like everybody else as a kid. I'm 46 years old, so I was playing games in the 80s, Monopoly and Risk and all that stuff. Didn't really play board games at all, and played a lot of video games in the 90s. Again, we're talking like literally Atari 2600 in 1981, through all the systems. I'm the same age as video games, essentially. So I grew up with all of them and played most of them throughout high school and college. And really, it wasn't until about 5 years ago, I had a coworker, his name's Chad Martinell. He and I were coworkers in Seattle, and Chad currently runs a game store in Enumclaw, Washington called Cole Street Game Vault. So a little plug in there for Chad and his wife, Jan. They have an awesome store there. I've had a chance to visit. But Chad kind of got me into board games and we started playing. There's a great local game store in Seattle called Blue Highway Games that kind of became my hub for gaming myself. Also, my kids were playing Pokemon there when they were young. There's a great Pokemon league. I was actually part of the league, getting destroyed by 9-year-olds as an adult. So that was a fun dad experience. And in the midst of that, then, kind of fast forward to 2018 and got back into hobby gaming. I hadn't really done a lot of that over the years. And so, as I got into more games, I identified more barriers where I was having trouble playing some of these games or needed some help. And so I think whenever I first kind of identified, Sagrada was one of the first ones I can think of that I was really like, oh, I really like this game, but I'm really having trouble being able to play it. and did some research online and wasn't finding much about this topic. There's a really great website called Meeple Like Us. It's out of the UK. And there's a guy there that has over the years written a lot of great articles on accessibility in general, including colorblind and low vision needs, but then also some other areas of that. But there wasn't anybody who was really just focused in on the color vision experience. And so I'd done a little bit of that in my day job. I'm a traffic engineer, which in some ways is kind of funny because of the red, yellow, green of the traffic signals and white and yellow stripes. And we use color a lot with, traffic signals and signing and striping. And I think I could actually be pretty good at my job because of my deficiency, because I think about people maybe experiencing as road users in a little bit different way. And I'd done some accessibility work in transportation. And so porting some of that over, in a lot of ways, traffic control devices like signs, stripes, and signals are just it's UI, UX, it's all the same stuff, right? We're trying to give people the information that they need to navigate safely and efficiently across the transportation system. In a game, we're trying to develop the kind of tools we need for people to understand this system, right? Or this world that we've created for them to get into. So ported over some of the tools and things that I kind of knew about and had even learned a little bit about in that space. And just decided it's very 2009, but just started writing a blog, even though it was 2018, and just started writing some reviews of my own experience of these games. And then one of the first things that kind of struck me, I didn't really know much about the industry or these people in the industry. This is, Wingspan had just come out in 2018. And Elizabeth Hargrave, she's doing something on Twitter like, hey, I'm sitting at the airport, ask me anything. And I sent her a question about something about color vision, and she responded back. And I was like, what in the heck? These game designers it's just different, right? I never talked to the game designers of Nintendo, right? It just wasn't part of my life to make a connection of who actually makes these games. And that's a very different experience here in the board game space, at least for me. And so that really kind of clued me into, oh, wait a minute, that's interesting. Elizabeth Hargrave actually responded to my question. So I was able to use that as part of an article that I wrote about Wingspan, which is a game that I thought would maybe not be colorblind friendly, because a lot of nature games aren't, because the natural world is not colorblind friendly. And so being able to try to incorporate a lot of reds and greens and browns and oranges and yellows into your game can inherently be a problem. In Wingspan, it's not. I find that game just fine from an accessibility standpoint, which is great. Also, all the little eggs that are different colors have the exact same usage, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a pale yellow egg or a white egg or a pale blue egg. They all mean the same thing. And so once I learned that, I was less concerned about that game. So that happened. I mentioned Peter McPherson before. I'd asked Peter McPherson a similar question and learned after asking him that he himself was colorblind. I had no idea. I was doing a review of Tiny Towns. And so that was really cool to think, oh, there's actually colorblind people who make games. That's pretty great. I met Eric Slauson. Eric has made Tattoo Stories and Monstrosity, if you know that. I've never met Eric in person, but we got connected online. I wrote a profile about him on my site. That's another thing I try to do, is bring in some of these voices of who are game designers, people in the industry who are colorblind, who do this work, just to let others of us know we're not alone in this particular barrier. I think that's pretty important. And so getting to talk with Eric about some of the work that he's doing and just, navigating the world as a colorblind person. And it just kind of went from there, right? Again, I'm not monetizing the website. I'm not, as mentioned, I do get some review copies. I do, being in the Seattle area in some ways makes it easy. I have direct access. I used to live a few blocks from Sean Stankovich at Flat Out Games, and we went to the same game store. And I've built a relationship with Flat Out and spent some time with them. Funko Games is right here in Seattle. I got to meet with them a couple of weeks ago and just sit down for an afternoon and talk about some of the color issues with some of their upcoming games. And so just having that access locally is obviously very handy, and frankly, just lucky. I didn't move to Seattle looking to the board game scene, but it's here. And so spending time with those folks, I think is cool. And it's just, as you know, a lot of game designers around here making a lot of cool games everywhere, but I think particularly the Seattle area, there are folks I know here who are doing that. So that's kind of given me a bit of a jump start there, I think. and then got connected, just started asking, right? Hey, I do, again, it's a little bit of a niche different thing. I'm not just another game reviewer. I do have a particular angle. So be able to share that with people, and I can ask questions, that might be a little bit different. I can ask how they've addressed things, and then even be part of their teams. I've done some proofreading and editing for Stonemaier games as a freelance proofreader. And I also do a lot of technical writing and stuff, just another skill set that I have just as an engineer. And so that tends to be a pretty handy set for rulebook reviews and proofreading, and make sure all the sentences make sense and everything is logical. But in doing that, I can also provide feedback on color related issues, or maybe low vision related issues. And so I think that's Stonemaier is a particular company that I've struggled with some of their games. Viticulture, one of my favorite games. It is not colorblind friendly. It's difficult to play. I've marked mine up. If you think about not just the player colors, but the cards, the blue and purple cards on the right side, those look almost identical to me. Now they do have markings on the back. They are double coated technically. But some of the iconography that refers to the blue and the purple cards is not coded. It's just a little bitty rectangle in that color. So again, I modified mine. That actually took some doing. That was a lot of cards and a lot of things that needed to be changed. So I did that and then wrote about that. I've got a actually an article I'm pretty proud of on that one. That was a big mod, and took a lot of effort to get that one just right. And I think it's good. It's good. And then I actually helped. I was a proofreader on Viticulture World, which was kind of interesting because I was an editor and a proofreader on a game that still is not colorblind friendly. Viticulture out of the box did not solve all the colorblind problems, right? And so needing to be okay with that, like, imperfection, right, or gray area of like starting to kind of get in the industry and be part of trying to help from the inside, while also being a little bit of a watchdog or a reviewer on the outside, and then being sure I'm being very clear about those. So if you ever see me review a Stonemaier game, or you're going to see 2 reviews for Flat Out games coming out in the next couple of weeks, very much have a disclaimer at the bottom that, hey, I also do, other stuff for them. And so that needs to be taken into account. But I'm also like just trying, I think, being as honest as I can about what I'm trying to do, both with them as these are publishers who really care about more people getting to play their games. So I feel like I can have that honest conversation with them. And maybe in some ways, like you, this isn't my day job. I'm doing this for fun. I'm sometimes making a little bit of money off this, but I'm not making money off this. This isn't my, maybe helping to fund my hobby a little bit, but helping me buy a microphone here and there. But it's really doing it for fun, and really doing it to try to help people, really truly to help more people play more games. Like that's the entire goal here. And in some ways, the color vision thing, which is a pretty high percentage, right? We talked about, it's 4% of the overall population. If you kind of do half male, half female as this issue, there's very less than 1% of 1% of the population has significant, say, physical barriers or mobility, or maybe they have one arm, or, that's a whole nother subset of people who really don't have a voice, right? Nobody's written a one-arm board gamer website. Like that's the thing that doesn't exist, because there aren't as many of those folks. But what if they could also be cared for? What if we could think of ways, how do you play viticulture with one hand? I don't think it's that hard, right? If you have a couple tools, I think there's ways to make that happen. Is there somebody advocating for them? Are designers and publishers thinking about, hey, what about the community of people who have really low vision? What about the community of people who can't sit at a table for 2 hours? Is there a set of games? Are there ways to mitigate that? And that could even be better chairs too, right? There's ways to kind of deal with that, but there are ways to maybe make the games easier to see. What if I have trouble reading upside down? If you can't read upside down, board games are hard, because half the people in a board game have to read upside down about half the time, right? Or sideways.
Looking at Flamecraft.
Yeah. And so you think about people who have any kind of like ADHD or reading comprehensive issues, or what about games where you're supposed to read out loud? Some people have significant anxiety as adults about reading aloud because it wasn't something that they ever got very good at. Man, should that keep them from the table? I hope not, right? But it probably does, right? There's a lot of these kind of like underground or kind of hidden barriers, I think, that people experience that they're probably even less comfortable talking about. And so I feel like mine is pretty minor, right? Look at me. I'm in a white guy in the middle of the United States, or not in the middle. I grew up in the middle of the United States, but I have all the privileges, right? I have all the privileges. I have this very small accessibility limitation related to color vision. And I've even used that to make money, right? And so I don't need anybody, feeling sorry for me. What I do want to do though is find those people who are not getting helped and be able to help them play
Right.
games. That's kind of all it is.
Dude, I have so much respect for people like you. Because one of my favorite content creators, and what was actually kind of a motivator for me to start a channel, was Jason from Shelf Stories.
Yeah,
Um, there's something about asking the hard questions within board gaming, right? Because with board games, because you probably have a similar story to me, where it's like, yeah, I grew up playing chess. I grew up playing Monopoly, Life, Sorry, Inter Hasbro, Miller, Bradley game here, right? And it wasn't until maybe 7 or 8 years ago that I really, nah, I say even before or after that, I say probably about 5 or 6 years ago is when I got into, breaking that surface of board gaming, where going past the Monopoly, Hasbro kind of games, where
yeah,
you look at your shelf behind you, like the majority of the population won't even know half of those games. I,
right.
I don't even know half of those games, but
Oh, I haven't
but
played them all. Let's not be let's be a little transparent here. I
but for
also have a
me,
significant shelf of shame, including some of the titles behind my head. So
but for me, like, um I appreciate y'all because y'all put another spin to me just playing games. Like, I probably could have went the rest of my life playing games and would never thought of the problems that y'all had, and
mm,
or some of the issues that are starting to rise in board games, because you're starting to see more and more people speak out about things. I mean, we look at, man, what's that Kickstarter? Tournament Fishing, I think it was, that had that issue with the frog, with the
oh,
but
absolutely. Yep, yep,
so with that happening, and to see the outrage in that, or talking about, the lack of POCs in games, and starting to see more of that
absolutely.
happening, right? Or
And I think
more
how
companies,
women are treated, right? The art used for women in games
right?
is a huge one for
Yeah,
sure.
like there's so much that is starting to come into board gaming, where
Yep.
more designers are starting to have these thoughts. Or let me phrase that. They are starting to become more aware of these things. And I think that, well, to go back to what you were saying about Elizabeth Hargrave, like, there's it's crazy the amount of accessibility that we have to designers. Like, I can't imagine reaching out to one of my favorite game series is Gears of War. I can't imagine me reaching out to Cliff Blazinski and he can just respond to me like it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost a privilege for us, but I think it's more of it's more of a representation of how small board gaming still is, where some of these board gamers, like, there's I don't even know, maybe Isaac Childress is probably the only one that really um uh making Lambo money. Like, there's not a lot of people that's making like a ton of money where this can be their full-time jobs. Like, these are still
Yeah.
people doing jobs and designing board games. So it's like the money is almost there, but the business model is still shaky in terms of how you can really make money, and that's probably where Kickstarter comes into play. But um to not stray too far from what I'm trying to say, like, I think that there's this is what excites me about board gaming now. Like, yeah, I still love playing games. I hop on and talk about Rogue and Gambit, who just got released from Marvel Champions. I'll still do that. But to talk to people about their experiences and what can we do to make board gaming more inclusive and more um accessible for the public, I think this is where board gaming, like, hit that next stride, because it's kind of cool to see games like Terraforming Mars and Marvel United get popular in Target, to where they can
Right.
just mass produce and send them to Target. Like, that's such a good sign for board gaming. How do we keep that going while also making sure we're not leaving anybody behind? And I think that that's probably something we're still a decade or so out on really fixing, but it's nice to see that that get that boulder rolling, and it's just been amazing to see, man. I'm so excited that I'm just glad to be here, kind of thing. Like I'm just here
Yeah.
observing
Oh,
and
me
having
too.
fun, but it's yeah, but
Well, I
it's
think
fun to see it.
a good example there. I think Eric Lang is an awesome example, right? Eric Lang
Oh
makes
yeah, I
Blood
love Eric Lane.
Rage, one of the gamerest of games, and then Eric Lang makes Marvel United. Eric Lang also designed Disney Sidekicks, which is actually one of my favorite games that nobody
Oh, I've never
plays.
even heard of that one.
Exactly. It's a little mass market game about the side characters of Disney that was out for a year or so. And, just kind of went through the quick, 12-month target thing and then kind of disappeared. But
Write that down real quick. Disney sidekicks.
Disney, yeah, it's called Disney Sidekicks.
All right,
I actually
cool.
got to work on I'm a big defender of mass market games. I think
Let's go.
one of the best ways for us to be growing the hobby is to not poo-poo games like Marvel United and oh hell, even throw burrito, right? I think all these games have a
Yeah,
place, Monopoly in life included, um,
agreed.
for people to be at a table playing games. I don't know that I'd be playing these games if I hadn't played Monopoly and whatever, sorry, and Shoots and Ladders even as a little kid, right? I
Right.
think that there's still a lot of value in those games as well. I do want to make one clarification. I do feel like the work that I'm doing and the work that Jason's doing are pretty different. He's asking way harder questions than I am and tackling them amazingly. And I never miss
Agreed.
one of his shelf stories. I think it's fantastic what he's doing. So just want to be sure that those, I think he's on a little bit different level. Than me. I'm still, I think, tackling something that's relatively easy in comparison. But I really do appreciate what he's doing and really enjoy interacting with him. I think he's definitely doing the work of asking some of the biggest of big questions that I think will continue to become more of an issue as this industry gets bigger. I think we're seeing some of that now. I think we're going to see
Yeah.
even more of that. I think it's happened in video games, right? But we're starting to even see some of that. Even how are people treated who are making these games, right? That's been a long running problem in video games that we know about for the last couple of decades. I think we're starting to see some of those examples in board games that maybe kind of stayed under the radar as these companies were stayed pretty small. But as there starts to be really big money in this industry, which I think we're getting to that point too, that also attracts a lot more people who have maybe like a money motive. I'm all for every company needing to make a living, obviously, but I want to buy their
Right.
games so that they have a business. And I charge for some of the stuff that I do, like even within the industry. I think that's very much appropriate. And I think it's important to have a passion for this stuff. And I think that's true in video games. I think that's true in my day job. I'm a traffic safety engineer. I truly am trying to save lives. And I'm a consultant. And so I do that for pay. And there is a gray area of conversation I have to have about that with myself all the time about, yes, I think I'm doing good and I'm getting paid well to do it. And so what does that mean? And I think that's kind of a similar thing. Anytime we're talking about entertainment or gaming or going to Disneyland or whatever, these are all like for-profit companies who are also creating joy. And I think that's a weird place to like navigate. And I'm glad we're getting to have some important conversations within that. And I hope within that, the more people get to experience it, right? It's like back to that angle as well as.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. You pretty much answered all the questions that I had. I didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to speak on that maybe you haven't got the opportunity to talk to somebody about color blindness or not. Because if not, then I was just going to ask you about some games that you're playing right now, games that you're looking forward to. I know we kind of talked about you maybe getting into Marvel Champions, like what you
We
know,
did.
but
Yeah, no, let's jump
yeah,
into that. Let me pull up my
yeah.
February list real quick. I had just posted
'Cause I
that.
saw
I
you was
just,
telling me you was getting into it, man. Your boy
uh,
lit up.
so I will admit, I have not tried Marvel Champions yet. So I
Hey
probably
man,
should
we
have
got
said that out
time.
loud. I'm not sure if I would have gotten the full hour of the video if I had announced that early on a Marvel
Fair
Champions channel.
enough. Fair enough.
But I am interested. I really am. I've dabbled a little bit in the Lord of the Rings game from Fantasy
Oh,
Flight,
okay.
from 10 years ago. I have the Arkham horror card game,
Yep.
and played a decent amount of Marvel Legendary or Legendary Marvel, whatever it's called. So
Yeah.
have enough touch points that I feel like I'm circling around Marvel Champions and just, haven't just dropped the money to get the game and get started. But I think it's something I would enjoy for sure. I do a lot of solo gaming. My wife isn't a big gamer. She'll play from time to time. My kids are in college now, so I've just got a lot of time at the house to kind of piddle around.
Yeah.
I do play, out and about with people at game stores and things, but also do play quite a bit by myself. This last weekend, I learned Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. I went through that whole kind of 5 scenario campaign that is the tutorial. That's a pretty great game. I liked it a lot. It feels, for me, I'm kind of a light medium gamer most of the time. I mean, I'll play a heavy game. I'm actually getting taught my first 18xx right now. Ryan Espen is teaching me 18 Chesapeake. That's on the other end of the spectrum. Not usually the style of game that I play the most of, but that's been good to learn too. I feel like being in the space, I want to learn everything. Like I'll play Twilight Imperium someday, I'm sure, once I have a chance to get at a table and spend an entire day doing that. And then I also like playing, 15-minute print and plays. I'm a fan of roll and writes are one of my favorite genres for sure. Doing a quick check on my list to see if anything else I've like played or learned recently. Yeah, I recently picked up that G.I. Joe deck building game. I like deck builders quite a bit. I mentioned playing it before. Yeah, I mentioned, Legendary Marvel, but that G.I. Joe game is pretty good. I've enjoyed that one too.
Yeah, because for me, like when we talk about like, how can I put it? So with deck builders, like there's only a handful of them that I've played, even though it's like one of my favorite genres. Because for me, it started off with the Harry Potter battle, Hogwarts battle, and
Yeah, me too.
then Aeon's End like took over for me. Like
Oh, nice.
I bought no, one of my friends bought it. He had his nieces and nephews play, and then I fell in love with it instantly went and got it, and then have been buying it ever since. Because I'm missing War Eternal and what's that other one? War Eternal and the Legacy one.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But ever since New Age, like I've backed every last one of them since then. So for me, like that is the epitome of deck building for me. But
Oh,
I
nice. Yeah.
saw Ryan, Mr. Raw game and play the GI Joe one, and that one looks intriguing. Like that's one that's on my list to check out soon. And I really liked Imperium Classics. Like that's one that
Oh, I haven't
really
played that yet. Yeah.
surprised
Okay.
me. It's a beast to set up for solo.
Yeah.
It is a beast to set up. But once you understand it, it's actually not as aggressive as it looks on the table. Like it's
Okay.
pretty straightforward. Like especially if you have some experience with deck building, like it's pretty straightforward with how you can go through um and just figure it out and play it. It's just a monster to set up.
Yeah. The other thing I really like is the simplicity or the cleverness of small box games and wallet games, so like the button shy games. So games like Tussy Mussy, another Elizabeth Hargrave game. Gosh, what else? I'm trying to look at my small box, like the Tiny Epic series, some of those games. Oh, and there's one called One Deck Dungeon. I don't know if you played that.
Oh
That's a
yeah,
dice rolling
it's kind of
game, and that's
fire.
a really good solo and co-op. That's a good 2-player co-op game as well. So I like that one. Essentially kind of in some ways like a dungeon crawl, but just with cards and
Yeah,
dice. It does a really nice job of that. Very good. What
yeah,
else are you playing? What have you been playing this month?
yeah. Because I'm looking to learn Red Rising because I got my hands on that one in Circadian's First Light. So Miniature Market had a sale recently where man, I swear they got like those Joseph A. Bank deals, where it's like buy one shirt get the whole store free. Like that's how I
Yep.
feel with Miniature Market. Like they just put everything on sale, and I was debating between Circadians and something else, but the other game ended up getting sold out. So I was like, oh well, I guess I'm rolling with Circadians. So because I really do like medium to heavy Euro games. I love them. I think the problem is setting them up and learning them. But and maybe that's probably the problem with all the board gaming. Like once you get over that hump of learning the game, like it's just downhill. Let me phrase that. It's a smooth ride from there. But that's been kind of the trouble that I have with those bigger Euros. Because another one that I bought recently at a board game swap was I'm going to butcher the name of it. Taiwan Tensu,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I'm not going to try to
That
correct you because I don't know how
yeah,
to say it.
I think it's Taiwan Tensu, but somebody will be able to correct me. But I like the idea of those just like meaty Euro games. I ain't quite like Vital Lacerda level yet, but I'm trying to get myself up to that, to that range. So for me, like that's Taiwan Tensu is another one that I've been learning. Of course, Marvel Champions just dropped Gambit and Rogue. I got
Nice.
I got Gambit right here on the table, so I've been playing that quite a bit because I actually kind of fell back from Marvel Champions for a second because they had a nice little break. But now that those two have come out, now I'm back at it with playing that. Viticulture was actually one I played recently solo. Went and bought it, and it was so funny because they give you, I think, 7 rounds to be able to outscore the AI, and it took me to like round 5 or 6 to really understand the orders and how to actually like have your field, prepare these grapes, and then crush the grapes into these particular wines. And by the end of it, I'm like, it's just wine making, Maurice. Like, why did that take so long? Why did it take so long for me to figure that
Yeah,
part out?
no, I'm
But
the same way. That's
oh man,
like
that was
most of those Euros it takes. I always feel like my first game's a throwaway. I'm really just trying to figure out like what the heck's even going on around here for sure. I like the Uve
crazy.
game. So like Agricola has become one of my favorite games over the last
Oh, I
year.
like it.
So
Yeah.
but I mostly played on BGA because again it's kind of a beast to set up. And then yeah, Caverna, Feast for Odin, I like a lot. But again, it's each of those is on BGA now, so it's kind of like almost too easy to fire them up and play. But I still like the tactile nature. I mean, I sit at this computer for 10 hours a day in my day job, and so I'm really usually ready to get away from a screen and put something on my table in the
Right.
evening or on the weekend. So I actually haven't played all that much online games. I usually much prefer, if I'm going to play something on a screen, I'd rather be on my couch playing Xbox or something. And if I'm going to be playing a board game, I want to like have this stuff. I have all these games behind me. Then to be playing on my iPad just kind of feels weird. It's like, why did I buy all this cardboard if I'm going to be, you know, playing the same game that I have on my shelf on my tablet? I should go ahead and just sell the game. I don't know. So just trying to figure. There's no rules. If other people like doing it different, fine. But I find myself wanting to play a little bit more tactically, I think, with my hands whenever I can.
And is there a game that you're looking forward to towards the 2023 that is allegedly being released during this year that you're looking forward to? And if you need time to think, I can give you my answer for it.
Yeah, why don't you go first and I will think on it. I think I have a couple.
The Dark Quarter. So when I heard that it's like Mansions of Madness meet Chronicles of Crime, that was an instant buy for me. And it's a Lucky Duck game, and it's essentially like uh, Mansions of Madness, where you're playing like an investigator going around to do things, and but you're trying to solve these cases, and that when that instantly, and it's based out of New Orleans too. So for me as a Southerner, like that made me happy to see. So I think that uh, that one is the one that I'm the most excited for. Like I think they have a release for it roughly around October, November. Since it's Kickstarter, like I wouldn't be surprised if it got pushed to 2024 because of logistic issues that's been happening since COVID. But that's the one I'm heavily excited for because I think that just blends two of my favorite games together. And right when I saw it, I instantly locked in. Like I have to have that
Nice.
one.
That's fantastic. All right, I came up with two as you were talking. I
Ooh,
came to mind. One is the Lord of the Rings adventure book game. This is a Marcus Ross design, Ravensburger. They did like I got the Princess Bride one a year or two ago. It's just a little spiral bound flip out book and just pretty cute, pretty light. I guess it'll be like a $20-$25 game at Target or something. That one I think just came out this week. So that one I'm interested in. Just I'm kind of a Lord of the Rings nerd, and so it kind of fits that piece. And then the Fox Experiment is another Elizabeth Hargrave game. I guess she's on my mind today. that kickstarted last year and should be delivering later this year. So that's one. Oh, I'm going to add one more. I'm looking forward to it, but I did get to play because I have a review copy of Point City. So this is the Flat Out Games kind of
Ooh,
follow
yeah.
up to Point Salad,
Okay.
but it's a little bit of a Civ builder. It's a little more like a mix between Point Salad and Splendor. If you've ever played Splendor.
Okay. Yeah.
So, for those that don't know Splendor, it's a very classic get a bunch of stuff and then buy victory points. And so you got to decide at what point in the middle of the game are you going to pivot away from buying more resources to then using your resources or using your engine essentially to get victory points. And this has that same kind of tough question about when do I make that move? And then has a little bit of the bonus point stuff that'll remind people of Point Salad, but really cool and a really, really nice. You're picking a pair of cards in a 4x4 grid. So in that way, it's kind of like if you've played Cascadia. In Cascadia, you pick a tile and a animal that goes on, a token that goes on one of the tiles, but you have to pick a pair together. And so you're like, I really want that tile, but I don't really care about that animal, but I want that tile bad enough that I'm going to grab that pair anyway. This has that same idea of this isn't the perfect 2 cards, but one of those cards I really want. So I'm going to pick one that I don't really care about or whatever. So it's a really good, and it has a really interesting solo. Most of the Flat Out Games solo modes like Calico or Cascadia or Verdant are pretty simple, little conveyor belt where you just drop some stuff off the end and then you refill as a solo mode. It's just a beat your own score. In Point City, you're actually competing against an AI who's also taking cards off of that 4x4 grid. So you know where they're going to take cards from. So you need to get the cards you want before they take them. But also they're taking cards and generating points from those cards. So you know what cards are going to take. So maybe sometimes on my turn, I might be making a move that isn't necessarily the best point earner for me right now, but it is keeping my AI opponent from generating a bunch of points on their next turn. You can kind of look ahead. So it's really cool. I'm really liking that. I don't know, surprised me. I like Point Salad fine, but I think Point City is really, for me, a significant upgrade from that previous game in the kind of same general universe, at least in terms of look and feel.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, I want to say I appreciate you for taking the time to hop on this call with me, man, because this is, man, you might be the first of like a new wave of of something for me to do with my
I would
project of a channel.
No, please do. I think it's one of my favorite things to watch, frankly, are kind of interview type conversations like this. So thanks. Not that that sounded a little bit egotistical. You know what I really like is me. We should do this again sometime so I can watch myself talk. No, this is great. Thank. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And yeah, folks, just colorblindgames.com is the site where kind of all my stuff is. I had mentioned to you even today, I'm not sure where my social media life is headed these days with kind of all the craziness happening on Twitter and elsewhere. But I have like an about me page or a little contact page on my website that'll always kind of be where I'm living. And I'm not like shutting down accounts or anything, but I'm not nearly as active some places I used to be. And I'm back to being places I can't imagine 5 years ago that I would have thought that I'd be active on Facebook every day, but here we are. So the times are changing and then changing back again. But yeah, happy to chat anytime. What I found in this time of doing social media differently is I'm actually having more one-on-one conversations of just email or direct messages or conversations like this that frankly I'm finding kind of more valuable than just typing in tweets all day long. So I think it might actually be not even that stuff was, notwithstanding. I think it might just be a better vibe trying to do more small group and in-person stuff anyway. So this has been great.
Yeah, like I'm sitting here thinking because I've been I've been doing more videos where I've been talking about like some of the experiences that I've had. And I was like, man, I think I might just start like as I'm thinking here, talking to you, I'm like, man, I might just start grabbing a person or two and just be like, let's hop on and talk about culling board games or something like that. Like that might be an interesting direction.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, I'd encourage it. I mean, always try it, right? Try everything once and just see how it goes.
Yeah, man, I greatly appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I'll have Brian's information in the description. Once again, thank y'all so much, especially if you made it this far. You know, it's been fun talking with Brian. We always banter back and forth on Twitter, so it's been fun to be able to actually get him on a call and be able to talk about something that is extremely important to him and something that I was curious about. So once again, thank you, Brian, and once again, my name is Maurice, and thank y'all and have a wonderful day.